Good evening, everybody. We are
Hey, Rob.
recording.
Hi.
John, you're not here. You're online.
I am so sorry, but we got people working at the house, and I got to clean up the house. And Gloria's leaving tomorrow in the morning. She's leaving me forever, and
It's taken way too long.
yeah.
Yes.
So
I had the over under at 25 years. So it's 25 years. We passed it.
maybe
It's
tomorrow.
okay, Jesse's here to protect me. I just want to make
Jess.
sure that you understand that Jesse is here to protect me because John is not here.
I'm not.
John
I'm
is
sorry.
one of our.
All right.
Hey,
And I'm
we
not there
aren't
to
here
protect
either.
you.
That's true. Oh yeah,
Hi,
Mike, you're
Joyce.
not here to protect me either.
Where's Mike?
We're in
What?
Sedona.
Oh, how's Sedona?
Beautiful.
Good.
Always beautiful.
I don't know. The last few days, today was a beautiful day. The last few days were horrible here. Cold.
Oh, well, that can
Yes.
happen, but
Sunday
it's
we
still
had
beautiful.
snow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Sorry.
lot of people on.
There are because no one's here.
We're afraid of
Oh,
you, Rabbi.
I'm not low. Told you I've got all I need. I got Jesse, so we don't need any of you.
Hi,
you
Jesse.
don't. I thought you needed us.
No. I'm glad to have anyone who's here, but oh man, there's yeah, well, we're on Facebook too. I don't know if anybody is on with us on Facebook yet, but maybe. But
Oh, I see Cheryl and David.
they're here. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
The Kales are here from Washington. The Schulmans are here from Texas. Great state of Texas.
And
Stolmans
Mike
are
and
in
Mary
Santa
and
Clarita.
John.
Technically, Mike and Mary are in Arizona. I'd like to have
Oh.
like 4 or 5 states represented every time. That'd be really great.
At least.
We can get up to 10 or 11. That's really good.
What about all 50?
That's way too ambitious, at least for now. But I'm not giving up. I'm not going to give up.
Don't give up.
No.
Don't give
but
up.
We'll try to do our best to
I have a bone to pick with you, though, Rabbi.
yes, why?
You know, we're coming home on Friday, and
Yeah.
Saturday it's going to rain.
Yeah.
It's your fault.
It's not
He didn't do it.
it's not my doing. That is unfortunate. Is it really supposed to rain here again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you
Saturday.
serious? Darn it. I was hoping to.
Rabbi,
So-
do you know who Robert Shields is?
No,
Okay.
who is that?
He was a TV personality that moved out here to Arizona, and he's an artist now. We bought a piece, beautiful piece. He's a nice Jewish boy.
Nice. I'll look him up. I'll look up his art.
Yeah, we've seen him a couple times actually at the temple up here over the years.
Oh, nice. I will look him up. I'll just put a note.
He was a mime,
A what?
a mime, M-I-M-E.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they had a TV show called Shields and Yarnell.
Oh yeah, Shields and Yarnell. I remember them.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
Robert
they were
Shields.
Jewish.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Is he a
we bought
painter
this-
or blown glass or what does he do for art?
He paints, he does all kind of stuff. And I'll bring it in next Wednesday to show you guys. It's beautiful.
All right.
Yeah, they were big. I mean, they were on like the Tonight Show, and I mean,
They had their
a
own
big-
show, and then they divorced, and she went on to she portrayed CP3O.
Oh, really?
No, that was in I'm thinking of Spaceballs. She was the
Oh, okay. She was.
Spaceballs.
He
She was
Erase
the-
that.
She was. Yeah, but okay, I get you though. I can see what that was. That was the character voiced by Joan Rivers, by the way.
Exactly.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, very
Actually,
cool.
She passed away a couple years ago, actually.
Interesting. I totally remember them.
You know what, Rabbi? Speaking of passing away, who expected the real Joe to pass today, huh?
That who?
Joe Lieberman.
Yeah,
Joe
Joe
Lieberman.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to suggest that tonight we dedicate our study to him,
Yes.
because he
Good.
was a mensch, and he was
Yeah.
somebody who was very proud of his identity, and he was a guy who really believed in the best of this country, and
Yeah, he believed in the country over politics.
yeah. And he was well respected as a moral authority. I remember
Yes.
his discomfort and his I remember his kind of his discussions about when Bill Clinton was facing the charges that he was very upset about it, and spoke passionately on the morality and the leadership of the presidency, even though was speaking against his own party. But again, unfortunately, there are way too few like him in our generation. But
In fact, he got kicked out of the Democratic Party.
kind of, yeah, he ended up being independent. Well, that was also because, yes, and that was
Because
also
he was backing McCain.
what happened in his own state. Yeah, what happened in his own yeah, he essentially ran as an independent, and the people of Connecticut loved him so much that they
Yeah.
elected him.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll definitely dedicate our studies to Joe Lieberman. I was kind of shocked, it was kind of there was not like really a warning or anything
Right.
that he was sick, and so when
Well, I
I read
guess
it today, I was
they
like,
say he passed from a fall.
yeah, which can happen, right?
Yeah.
Can happen.
I won't fall. I promise.
Yeah,
You can't fall.
yeah, she's not gonna fall.
I know.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, why is the screen not on? That's weird. Wait, our screen isn't on here, and we now have some other people. Sheila's here, and Joanna's here. So
Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Mike.
I'm putting it on because I thought it was on, but yeah, here it is. It's gonna come on in a second. It's
All
heating
right.
up.
Good.
So, yeah, we're in the last part of Pirke Avot, which, as I mentioned, we actually study it starting at Passover. Ironically, we're going to be finishing it around Passover, but
And
we
where are we
study
gonna
it
go
from
from there?
Passover to Shavuot. What?
What are we gonna go from here?
I will have to figure something we can do starting Passover. I'm working on it. Mike. A surprise. No, I'm actually working on something
I'm
that
hoping you're gonna make me happy.
I will do my best. I hope I every day I wake up saying,
I
what's
don't
going to
have
make
to
Mike
tell you
happy?
what I want.
It's going to make Mike happy today. No, I listen, I do. I mean, not just you, everybody else too, if I can. But but ironically, we are going to finish it like kind of as we're going into Passover. Next week we will be in person again on Wednesday night.
Good.
So hopefully you'll join us. But yeah, we do have a lot of people online. We have 1 million online, and we have 500,000 here. But yeah, next week we'll still be reading next week. But this week we're going to finish chapter 5. And we don't soon. I was just saying, we don't know, but soon, Joanne. But I will tell you that we did look at, I showed you one text a few weeks ago that we're going to get to today. We kind of went through fast. But chapter 6, which we're going to get into in a moment, is a little bit different than chapter 5 in that it wasn't originally part of this book. They were extra texts that were added primarily to get us through that tradition of reading this from Passover to Shavuot. So if there hadn't been a tradition of doing that, there probably wouldn't have been a chapter 6. But chapter 6 was written by different people around the same time. So it's not like it was like from a whole different era, but it was not written with the same intent that Pirke Avot was, or again, edited together, because you'll see it. You'll see the tone be a little different. So just to remind people, and if you haven't been here a while, or if you haven't been here before, the first few chapters of Pirke Avot follow a pattern, right? Where a rabbi will say something, and generally speaking, his students or the next generation will take on after him. So it kind of goes that's for the first few chapters. The last couple of chapters we read actually start something different, which is they begin with a numerical formula, 10 things, 7 things, 4 things, 3 things. So that's what we kind of read the last few weeks, were these sections that were organized by numbers. The next part that we're reading in is not like that, but what does connect chapter 5 and chapter 6 is that they are all about kind of behavior, ethics, morality. What rabbinic folk, meaning the rabbis and their families and their students, should be expecting and can kind of think about and look forward to. And some of it's kind of tough to read because it's well, you'll see why it's tough to read, but it has shaped, the text itself has shaped rabbinic Judaism, and particularly the lifestyle that people have had for thousands of years. And actually, to some extent, what separates part of our community today that is devoted to Torah, like 24/7, you'll see it reflected in the text that we'll start reading today. But where we left off last week is we read this very famous text, which is one of the most famous texts in all of Pirkei Avot. It's oftentimes quoted. It's oftentimes referred to as kind of like the text about Jewish arguments, which we love arguments, right? We love debate. But this very famous text that we finish with, and we talked about it for a while, Kol Machloket Shehi L'Shem Shamayim, the arguments for the sake of heaven. If arguments are for the sake of heaven, we record them, they endure, we talk about them thousands of years later. And those are the debates that went on within the rabbinic community. The most famous being the debates of Hillel and Shammai, those two schools of thought, Hillel's and Shammai's, his students and his students. And then the one that was used as an example of an argument that was not a good argument was the one between Moses and Korach. That was not for the sake of heaven, and so much so that essentially, again, this midrash, this explanation is, we don't even know what they were fighting over. We just know that Korach said, why is Moses the one in charge? And we don't know what the argument was. You know, look, on the face of it, when we read that story in the book of Numbers, Korach just says Moses shouldn't be in charge. We all should have some power, which essentially is an argument against a totalitarian dictatorship, which would be a good argument. Of course, that's not what the rabbis thought, because to some extent, of course, Moshe is working for God. It's not his control, it's God's control. But the other issue is the Torah doesn't actually tell us what it was that prompted Korach to challenge Moses. And so they actually say there must have been a reason, but because it's not recorded, the Torah is actually telling us that's the argument you don't want to have. Because if it did keep it, then we'd be keeping meaningless arguments. And the Torah wants us to know, don't have them, don't engage in them. No one's going to remember what they are. So this is a good lesson for us. It's a good lesson for the rabbis. It's a good lesson for everybody that no one remembers. It's the famous arguments of sometimes that go on in families, that go on, generationally, where somebody says, we're not talking to that family anymore, and people don't even remember the reason why they stopped talking to them. Right? That's how families sometimes break up over nothing and things that are not important, that are not for the sake of heaven. So that is, it's a lesson for everybody, not just the rabbis, not just people who are debating things in politics. But yeah, that's the part we finish with. So that's a very famous section. And again, it kind of goes along too with what we're going to be reading, which are, guidelines, guidance for the rabbis in particular, to be thinking about these kind of things. Because they did argue, they did debate. That's what the Talmud is. Talmud is an ongoing debate. Not so much the Mishnah, which this comes from, but the next section of the Talmud, the other section, the Gemara, that what completes the Talmud, that section is arguments and debates, always. So let's look at the next text. This is the next paragraph. So this one says, whoever causes the multitudes to be righteous, sin will not occur on his account. And whoever causes the multitudes to sin, they do not give him the ability to repent. Moses was righteous and caused the multitudes to be righteous. Therefore, the righteousness of the multitudes is hung on him. As it is said, he executed the Lord's righteousness and his decisions with Israel. And that's a line from the end of the Torah. It's almost one of the last verses, right, of the Torah from Deuteronomy, from chapter 33. The book ends in chapter 34. So one of the last things the Torah says about Moses is that he executed the Lord's righteousness and his decisions with Israel. So that's a perfect text to explain why Moses was so special, because he caused the multitudes to do good things. Jeroboam sinned and caused the multitudes to sin. Therefore, the sin of the multitudes is hung on him. As it is said, for the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, which he caused Israel to sin thereby, which is a text from the book of Kings. Now, remember, King Jeroboam, for those who come on Tuesdays, we read about Jeroboam several months ago, the book of Kings. He was the king who separated the north from the south. So he's the one who rebelled against Solomon and Solomon's son Rehoboam. Jeroboam caused the northern kingdom to separate, which to some extent was a little bit due to Rehoboam because he was not a good king. But that's not what Jeroboam did wrong by separating the country into two. What really he did wrong was he established two shrines where people worshiped, not in Jerusalem. And that's really what he had done wrong. If he had simply had a political break from the South, he wouldn't have been talked about this way. But what he did is he caused so many thousands, millions of people over the generations in the North not to go to Jerusalem and to worship. And again, Jeroboam had a shrine in the southern part of his kingdom, just north of Jerusalem, Bethel, that was one of them. And the other one was far north in Dan in the north. And we've actually been to his shrine. Interestingly, his shrine has been excavated. We actually have the archaeological remains of his shrine in the north. We don't have his shrine in the south, but we have his shrine in Dan, and we've taken people there to the shrine in Dan. It's right up by the Golan, and it's in the forest, the Dan watershed of where the Jordan River starts, right near the Banyas. We always, when we go to the Banyas, we always take people to Dan to see the shrine, the altar that was there, where Jeroboam caused the people to sin. And if you recall, those shrines were, does anyone remember what was those two shrines? One in the north and one in the south of his kingdom? They were golden calves. Yeah. The golden calf. He had two of them, so they were calves. So some people think that the golden calf story in Exodus was actually a propaganda about what the northern kingdom had done by establishing the golden calves. The golden calves were not idols on their own, by the way. Jeroboam was making a statement that God was over his kingdom, was riding on those bowls from one end of the kingdom to the other. And that's clearly why he made them, but they definitely were interpreted as idols, and the people in the south thought they were very bad. And so Jeroboam actually goes down in history as one of the worst Jews of all time. So much so that in the Midrash, when it talks about somebody who's so bad because he makes other people sin, that they can't repent, that Jeroboam is still in hell. 3,000 years later, Jeroboam is still in hell. So they really accord Jeroboam as one of the like unrepentant or unsafe, like there is no way to fix him. Because somebody who makes other people do bad things is so bad in their eyes. Like if you do something bad, you can fix it. But if you make other people, and in particular, multitudes of people, not one person, but multitudes of people to sin, those people are really, really bad.
Irredeemable.
Irredeemable, unsavable. That's a tough one, by the way. But it also gives you an idea of why in Judaism, in our tradition, people who cause other people to do bad things are held with greater contempt than just an average, ordinary person who does bad things.
Hmm.
If you're a bad person and you do bad things, yeah, our tradition thinks you might have to go down and get purged a little bit of purgatory. But if you cause other people to do bad things, it's really a problem. That's why they hold people of power or people who have the ability to sway people's decisions in a very contemptuous way. I mean, it's one of the
Rabbi?
reasons, yeah, it's one of the reasons why reform rabbis or reform or Jews in Israel, for example, that are making other people do bad things are really, really bad. So it's not like if one person's doing a bad thing for themselves or for their family, it's bad and you're not supposed to like it. But if they're doing bad things to lots of people and helping a lot of people do bad things or aiding them or guiding them down a bad path, that's bad. Yeah, John.
You mentioned it twice. You mentioned hell and purgatory. So can you weave that in? And because this is now all of a
Yeah,
sudden
we're
starting to
gonna
discuss it.
we're gonna see a little bit more of it in today because it doesn't. Well, I think probably if maybe if I went to see if I go to any of the
I mean, I know we've discussed it a bit in the past, but I also know that we didn't find any of it in the Old Testament. Now all of a sudden we're starting to see it.
So do me a favor. Hold that question to this one because it'll be here in the next one, okay? Because right here it says Gehinnom in the nethermost pit. It's coming. So you don't have to wait long. It's the next paragraph. So here
I can wait. So trust me. I was just wondering.
No, we're gonna get to it.
Okay.
But again, Jeroboam is a political leader who leads people down a bad path, right? So he's not a priest. He's not a prophet. Definitely not a rabbi. He lives 1,000 years before the rabbis. So he's a king, right? He's the northern king, the first northern king. There was another Jeroboam II, who's not related to him, but had the same name. And he's one of the last kings of Israel. He reigns just before the Assyrians destroy that kingdom. But this guy starts the whole problem, right? So he's held accountable like at a whole nother level. King Ahab is one of the worst kings of the north, and he was held responsible too as a really bad guy too, especially because of his wife Jezebel. But Jeroboam is bad. If you want to understand what this mentality is, by the way, and I do want to tell you there's a relevant issue here. There's a lesson here that's actually very important. Judaism, again, even the most religious folk in Judaism and Jewish tradition, like even today, if you kill somebody in Jewish tradition, or if you commit the most heinous acts, Judaism, even Orthodox Judaism, even very traditional Orthodoxy, is very reluctant to have somebody executed. So our most conservative people in our tradition are also less likely than other conservative people and other traditions to execute somebody.
Mhm.
Okay? So that meant, what I mean by that is that if Israel today was led by the Orthodox, and they decided everything, there still would be very few executions, if you will, by the government. That's not the case in virtually, as you know, Christianity, Islam, any other religion.
Sure.
If it is a theocracy, there's people getting killed regularly. Okay? Today. You know that. A Jewish theocracy wouldn't do that. I don't mean that there might not ever be an execution, but very rare. And then rabbis know that because they say that a court that executes somebody every 70 years is considered, and maybe 7, then it goes, maybe 7. Rabbi Akiva says 70 is considered a hanging court. So you're not supposed to execute people. That's why when people say, like, did Jews execute Jesus? It's like, no, because first of all, they didn't have the power to do that during the Roman era. And second of all, they didn't go around executing people. Even if they had the power, whatever limited authority the Romans gave them, they just didn't do it. What?
Is it because they value life?
Because yes, and even though it's allowed by the Torah and actually prescribed for certain things, because life is so sacred and because we have to be absolutely certain that, like, everything was, like, the criminal has to know that his punishment would have been execution. If the criminal doesn't know, you can't execute them. I mean, I mean, ignorance of the law is not, in our country, it doesn't mean anything, right? But in Judaism, it does. So we're very less likely to execute people. Now, that being said, when it comes to lots of people, if Jews were saying, well, a lot of people are being hurt by this and being led in the wrong direction by it, then a different mentality goes into play. Okay? And by the way, that's not to say that, like, Judaism definitely allows for people to protect themselves in war. I'm not saying that, like, Judaism says you can never kill anybody, but generally speaking, it's not something we do a lot of. And a war as opposed to capturing somebody and then executing them, that's different. And that's one of the reasons why Israel is in a bind, because every time they capture terrorists, they can't execute them. So once they've been captured, they can't kill them. That's something you have to understand. That's why Israel is reluctant to capture terrorists, because they have to keep them alive. It doesn't matter. They could have killed 100 people. Israel does not have a death penalty. The only person who was ever executed was Eichmann. The only person. It was an exception that was made, and essentially, they went against, or they made it an allowance for that. Okay, so that's why I'm telling you this. Now, what am I getting to? This, which is that in one of the worst chapters in Jewish history, 30 years ago, and I mean really a dark day in our history, before October 7th, I would have said it was the darkest day in the last 30 years, was the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Now, when he was assassinated, and again, it's hard to believe it's 30 years ago. When he was assassinated, the justification that the people and the person who murdered him and the people who supported that and who called for his murder did it because he was causing the multitude to sin, because he was as a political leader was giving up land, they felt, of Israel that he had no right to give up. And so they called for his execution, not because he had sinned, but because he was causing the multitude to sin. And that's where the justification came from. Again, I made it very clear that, to me, that's one of the worst things that's happened in the history of Israel, the history of the Jewish people, therefore. But that's where it came from. It came from this kind of concept of causing the multitudes to sin. That's where Orthodox Judaism, like, says, well, you got to get in there and stop that. If people are going to sin, if they're going to be essentially held for for responsibility by doing something wrong, we have to stop it. So that was the mentality, and that's how. So the person who killed him was one of many people that had threatened to kill him. One of the reasons why it was so hard to protect him was because there were many people that had been kind of encouraged to kill him by their teachers. The person who killed him was a religious Jew who had been taught by rabbis that Yitzhak Rabin was acting like Jeroboam. So like for 2,000 years, and again, Jeroboam lived 3,000 years, but for 2,000 years, nobody ever said there's a Jewish leader we have to execute. There was no Jewish political leader. There wasn't a Jewish leader that somebody said, well, look at, he's a bad Jewish leader. There were maybe rabbis who did bad things, but there was no political leader that could have done this. So keep that in mind. That's a political leader. And it's only been in the last 76 years that we've had political leaders again. All right. Any questions or comments on that little text? That's a pretty heavy one. But it really lines up and sets us up for the next text, which is, I promised John, you're going to hell. Where, not John, but we are. Whoever possesses these three things, he is of the disciples of Abraham, of Abraham, our father, Abraham Avinu. And whoever possesses three other things, he is of the disciples of Balaam the wicked. So what are the three things? This is kind of going back to the numbers. A good eye, a humble spirit, and a moderate appetite. He is of the disciples of Abraham, our father. An evil eye, a haughty spirit, and a limitless appetite. He is of the disciples of Balaam the wicked. What is the difference between the disciples of Abraham, our father, and the disciples of Balaam the wicked? The disciples of Abraham, our father, enjoy this world and inherit the world to come. As it is said, I will endow those who love me with substance. I will fill their treasuries. It's a text from Proverbs. But for the disciples of Balaam, the wicked, they inherit Gehinnom and descend
This meeting is being recorded.
and into the nethermost pit, as it is said, where you, O God, will bring them down to the nethermost pit, those murderous and treacherous men. They shall not live out half their days, but I trust in you. And that's from Psalms. So those are two texts from the wisdom literature. The next section that we're going to be reading in our Tuesday morning class, we're going to be getting into Psalms and then Proverbs. But these two texts are from this other part, this last section of the Tanakh, of our Bible. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about people who are like Abraham on one side versus Balaam on the other. Now, what makes this different than the previous text that we had, which was talking about Moses versus Jeroboam? Well, interestingly, those are more political leaders in this case. And these are more spiritual leaders on the other side. Now, Balaam, as we read about in the book of Numbers, is the wicked prophet who's hired to curse us, and then God forces him to bless us instead. Where we get Matovu Olecha Yaakov, right? In Numbers chapter 25, this is where Balaam gets tricked now, or gets put into the situation that he has to bless us. Remember that whole scene with his donkey going, we talked about him before, right? About him going, and his donkey told him there's an angel in front of us blocking our path, and he didn't see it. So Balaam is a wicked prophet. And Moses, Abraham on the other side, he's not paralleled with Moses, by the way. I want to say he's paralleled with Abraham. So Abraham on one side and Balaam on the other, not Moses, who's a prophet too. But they have Abraham here. Now, there's a question here, which I don't really have the answer to, but I will tell you what the question is. The question is this really the Balaam from the book of Numbers? I'm not so sure it's the Balaam of Numbers. Why? Because in the rabbinic literature, Balaam is not just Balaam. He actually is a code word for somebody else. I've mentioned it before. I just don't know if anyone remembers. Does anyone remember I told you that Balaam is sometimes used as a text, as a cipher for, as a secret? Does anyone remember? Anyone? Hello? Does anyone remember who Balaam sometimes is? Nobody?
Nobody.
Nobody's going to jump in here? Nobody's going to jump in here?
No idea. The devil.
Nope. I will show you. No, I'm not gonna, I won't show you that text because that doesn't really happen. That doesn't help you too much. Well, Balaam is without a doubt powerful. The Bible understands he's powerful. The Bible understands that he has powers. And remember, he ends up getting destroyed in the next Torah portion after that because he leads the Moabites and Midianites into tricking our people into worshiping other gods through sexual, basically through a religious orgy. And Balaam helps corrupt us by doing that. And so Balaam ends up getting killed in the battle of Baal Peor for us. Again, another low point in the book of Numbers. But after this wonderful blessing that we get, that we end up sinking to this level, and then Balaam ends up getting killed in the skirt, and punishing them. But there's no question that the guy's powerful. So the rabbis develop these legends about Balaam that he's a super powerful wizard, like really on another level. And so he has powers. Does anyone want to guess now who I'm talking about, who the rabbis sometimes called Balaam? They don't mean Balaam. I'll give you another clue. Avraham is the father of our religion. Balaam is sometimes seen as the code word for not the father, but the spiritual head of, yeah. So it's difficult to know sometimes in the rabbinic literature whether they're actually talking about Balaam of Numbers or Balaam code word Jesus.
Oh, Jesus.
We don't know. And there are a lot of texts that we're not really sure. This one might be one of the ones that is an allusion to Jesus. Now, if you want to know why sometimes they use Balaam as a code word, was because they didn't want to aggravate and upset the Christian government now of the Byzantines, who were in power by the time that some of these later texts were written. So part of it we judge by when the text was written and where it was written. If the text was written by Jews that lived in Roman or then Byzantine-controlled Israel, they're more likely to use the code word for Balaam, for Jesus. If they're Jews that lived in Babylonia in the Persian control, which was Zoroastrian, it was not Christian, and they didn't like the Christians actually because the Persian Babylonian, we call them Babylonian, but they were Persian. The Persian kings at that time, the Sasanian dynasty, they were fighting the Byzantines. And actually, one of the things that we tried to do with them is make sure that they knew that we weren't Christian. We didn't want the Persians to lump us together with the Christians. So sometimes we maybe went out of our way to make fun of the Christians because we wanted to make sure that they knew that we weren't them. So where the Jews lived when they wrote these texts are important. They give us some clues as what the feelings were of them. Later on, one of the reasons why the Talmud would be burned by the church, especially in the Middle Ages, was because there were some texts that were anti-Jesus in them. Sometimes they flat out said Jesus, and there are not many. There's like 8 or 9 texts, but that was enough to burn the whole Talmud. So you got 72 volumes, and you've got 8 or 9 verses that talk about him, and they burned it. And so they burned volumes and volumes of Talmud over centuries because of those texts. But in some cases, those texts were taken out. The rabbi said, you know what? We really don't need that text. It's not that important for our understanding of Jewish life and Jewish law. So let's just take that out. So we do have lots of versions of the Talmud that have been edited to take out any, and they took out any Christian, anti-Christian text. This one is kind of in between. I think there's some things that kind of commend this to be actually a veiled reference to Jesus, namely because that they've pit him against Abraham, because Abraham really is our spiritual ancestor, and Balaam or Jesus is their spiritual ancestor. But it's difficult to know that for sure. The most important thing here is that these are considered to be, whereas Moses and Jeroboam were political leaders, these seem to be more religious leaders and have this kind of, if you will, leadership through the Spirit, through, not through power or, direction of telling people what to do, but through their characteristics, their personalities. And again, what are the good ones? A good eye, a humble spirit, and a moderate appetite, which is interesting, right? Because are like those the most important things that you need to have? But again, these are really things that are about the way you conduct yourself, not necessarily religiously, but in the course of your life, whatever you do, right? So the appetites, saying somebody has a moderate appetite, right, is basically saying, somebody who, I'm just looking at the Hebrew here. Let me just see. Yeah, it's pretty much the interesting one about a good eye is ayin tova, a good eye. What's interesting about that is somebody who looks at things and not is envious of them, looks at them in a positive way. I mean, we could say that somebody who judges people nicely and doesn't look at them critically, but a lot of it is looking at things, ayin tova, as not coveting and not being envious of what the other person has. So a lot of this has to do, if you think about it, is like greed and contentment, really, which is just, again, how you conduct yourself when you're eating, when you're doing business, when you're talking to people. Look, we mention this a lot because it's in the Talmud a lot. It's in Jewish learning a lot. It's in our superstition a lot. We don't usually use the word good eye. We do use the word ayin ra. And we usually say, you don't want to have the ayin ra. You don't want to do it yourself, and you don't want other people looking at you with an ayin ra, which is why we say kain ayin hara or kain ahara. No evil eye. Which again, not having people look at your stuff like they want it, like they should have it, not causing people to be envious of you, which is why you say kain ahara after you boast about whatever you have, right? You say something good and then you say kain ahara. I don't want people to be jealous of me. That's what the purpose of saying kain ahara is. So again, we usually don't say good eye, we usually say evil eye, and we don't want the evil eye. But again, it's also having as you can see, a humble spirit, and the way they translate a humble spirit. And really this moderate appetite is kind of like it's a spirit which has a sense of contentment and they translate it as moderation. It's a nice way of, just not being ravenous. The opposite kind of gives you the word the opposite in Hebrew is rachava, which definitely has more of an understanding of rachav, of being, limitless, meaning like unending. So moderate in the sense of like, again, not like, basically saying, I'm content with what I have. I'm looking at what I have in front of me, and it's good. Limitless appetite is like, I can't see any end to what I want. So those are good qualities on one side, and obviously the opposites on the other. The point of this, of course, and this is what I promised John we would talk about, is that the people who do the right thing, the people who have the right qualities, they enjoy this world. It doesn't, by the way, say they get everything they want, but it says they enjoy this world, which makes sense. Because if you don't have a limitless appetite, right? If you're content with what you have, you're going to enjoy the world, right? You're going to enjoy what you have in this world. And you're going to say, what I have is pretty good. So yeah, that makes sense. That's a great guidance, right? It's a great way of kind of saying, we have a way of being, a little bit happier, enjoying this world right off the bat. But more importantly, it's this part, inheriting the world to come, the Olam Haba. So if we get enjoyment in this world, that's wonderful. But most importantly, we get to inherit the world to come. Whatever the world to come is, and again, they interpreted that from their treasuries being filled. That's really the world to come. The opposite is that you go down to the deepest pit. And again, Gehinnom, and what it says specifically there, of course, is the nethermost pit. So that is not a good line. If you look at the line from Psalms, if you look at the full text, it says, "For you, O God, will bring them down to the nethermost pit, those murderous and treacherous men. They shall not live out half their days, but I trust in you." It doesn't, I mean, you could say in the book of Psalms, it doesn't really say what the nethermost pit is. It just says they're going to go to the worst pit in the world, which again
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
could be a pit full of snakes. Like Joanne's saying, it could just be a place that you have to, well, you don't want to experience it here, but you don't have to die in order to get there. Again, to get to what John said, every time we go through the Bible, we kind of come up against this, which is they shall not live out half their days. That's what the punishment is. The punishment doesn't seem to be the nethermost pit. It seems to be that they don't get to live in this world. Now, again, you can interpret it that it's about the world to come, but that's not what it says. The actual quote from Psalms is they don't get to have a long life. Look, folks, this exists throughout the book of Psalms, right? I'm just going to show you real quick because I was at a funeral today, and every time I'm at a funeral, and I don't do it a lot, by the way, it's not we're going to get to it on a Tuesday class in the future, but I will tell you, let me just do it real quick. Let me just go here real quick on this side. This is a psalm that you might have heard. The Lord is my shepherd, right? Psalm 23, you know it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a different translation, but it doesn't matter whether it's a King James translation or, I mean, I can put up the translation for you, by the way. I can put up a King James translation for you. So let me just put that up there so you don't actually, I don't know if they have the King James, but they have the JPS and they have all these ones. Anyways, here's the JPS. It's close enough. Trust me when I tell you. Actually, don't trust me. I'm going to put it up for you. The Hebrew too, right? So here's the Hebrew. And here is, here, let me show you the Hebrew. Oh, I want to show you that. Safaria has everything. But let me just show you. I want to show you the Hebrew and the English next to each other. Okay, so, I mean, I can't wait to get to this when we actually get to it on. But I want to show you this Psalm 23, right? Though I walk through the valley, right, of deepest darkness, which is, we usually translate that, of course, as the valley of the shadow of death, right? But Begate Salmavet means the valley of shadows of death. But, you know, whatever. But that's not the point. Look at the last line, right? It says, Vishavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim, which I don't look at it, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. What's the last word? And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. Somebody give me the last word. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever, right? It's the way it's always translated.
Mhm.
That's not the Hebrew. Le'orech yamim means for many long years.
Ah,
Orech means for many, many. Orech means length of days. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever implies that this is for the person who died.
yes.
So what I'm telling you is the Psalms are often translated not the way it's actually written in a very literal sense. Because if somebody told you, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for a very long time, that seems to imply that I'm living in this world and I'm going to go to the house of God, which is the temple, that I'm going to go there to the house of God as long as possible. I want to be in the house of God. That's a totally different feeling than what you're taught when you were not taught, but what you thought was happening when someone says it at the funeral.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I just said it today. I was at a funeral today and said it, and I'm very careful when I say it, but I always end with, and I shall dwell in the house of God or in the house of the Lord forever. Because everyone expects that. Because people don't want to hear me say for a long, long time. Because that's what it means. That's what Orech Yamim means. Doesn't mean forever. Leolam Va'ed is forever and ever. We have a lot of that in the Bible. There is Leolam Va'ed, but not here. Because people want to interpret it that way because they want it to be about death. The psalm is not about death. The psalm is about God protecting us. So the psalm was, at least in our tradition, was in the first place used as a psalm of comfort to the people who were alive. That God protects me even when I'm in a situation of death, even when I've lost somebody, even when I'm in a cemetery. So the psalm is really for the mourners. It's not for the person who died. But
Wow.
the way that it's been said and the way that it's been taught to us and the way it's used in Christian tradition, that it's totally been misinterpreted, because it says, when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, it's not I'm dead or I'm walking with dead people or I'm walking in a cemetery. I'm walking in a dangerous place where death can be around any side. Begate Salmavet means I'm walking through a dangerous valley, which is also another way of saying I'm in a really low place and I'm surrounded by things that scare me. But because I'm with God, I don't fear for harm. Now, what harm would you have if you're already dead to some extent? So this isn't about that. It's about people being protected. And again, even when they're in the presence of their enemies. So even in the worst places, I'm never scared. So that's what the psalm is really about. And it's not a psalm of death. We'll talk about that in several months when we get to it on Tuesday, but you got a little piece of it today. But the reason I did that is because this quote from Psalms is, you see what happens, which is that we start to do that. So for Christians to do it, it's like, how do you, like, I'm gonna say, well, the Christians are wrong for interpreting it that way. How could I say that when we did the same thing, right? We've done the same thing. So that's why I'm very careful to say, well, the Christians made up this whole concept of heaven, and we did it. I mean, we did it. This is inherit the world to come. So these people are going to hell. There is no hell in the Tanakh. But by the time of the rabbis, this phrase is completely understood from Psalms also to be hell. So how do we get? Well, you have to have a pretty solid view of the fact that heaven or hell are out there for us. So that's, by this point, that's what we have. But again, I just said, I'm not 100% sure that this is a little bit of a dig at Christianity. Not 100% sure. Or, by the way, it could also be against Jews who were not so much Christians who were doing their thing, but Jews who were doing other stuff, whether they were Jewish Christians or whether they were Jewish Mithraic people or Jewish Greek, ISIS worshipers or anybody else who's doing stuff that's not Jewish anymore are disciples of Balaam. So I don't want to say that it's one person or it's one tradition in particular, but it is possible that they're talking about people who had drifted outside of the Jewish community enough that they were following modern day Balaam. Again, could be the historical Balaam, but it also could be other more modern for the rabbis' time. They're more relevant to them, people that they saw as a problem. Any questions or comments? Did that kind of get into it a little bit, John? John?
Yes, it did. Thanks. Sorry, getting to the mute is
Yeah. No, it's-
but I find that very interesting about the Psalms because
I just want you to know that what it says, and that's people, hey, I'm not going to tell people this is what it has to mean or how it's interpreted or what a beautiful way of looking at it is. We will definitely get into that when we read Psalms in more detail. But I do want you to see it, especially since the rabbis quote it. They didn't quote Psalm 23, they quoted Psalm 55, but the Psalms were written for the rabbis now 1,000 years before their commentary. So they knew them, they known them for generations, and they were already, to some extent, as I said, 800 years, 1,000 years old by this point. That's a long time for people to be sitting with texts. It's a long time. That's how ingrained they were on us. And I guarantee you, our ancestors, these rabbis, they knew the Psalms by heart. They knew the Psalms like we know, American Pie, which would be a really long psalm, by the way. But like we know Paul Simon songs, which, by the way, his last album was 7 psalms. He wrote songs that were based on psalms to some extent. So, well, he talks about it. He's been interviewed a lot about it lately. But yeah, his last album is called 7 Psalms. So let's take a look at this one, because this one also mentions heaven and hell a little bit. But, well, this one doesn't have a proof text, a quote for it. So let's read this one. This was a shorter one. Judah, Yehuda ben Tamar. So here we have another rabbi, by the way, quoted, which we, again, we haven't had those in a while, right? We're going back to a rabbi, right? So I think the last one we had was, wait, all the way up. Well, you just see. Anyways, it was a while ago that we had a rabbi actually quoted.
Mhm.
Here we go. It's Judah ben.
The dead people in my life, dead Jews in my life. God's God.
No, there's nothing wrong. You can, of course, you should. Yeah, there's no reason not to. Just understand that when people say, where does it say in the Bible? It doesn't. But that doesn't mean that they're not. It just means that again, people had, they saw it. And look, we don't believe, or we're not sure. So if that's why I say it's a belief. We don't think or believe that the people in the time of the Torah didn't believe in a world to come. On the contrary, I mean, almost everything we see from their burial practices, from kind of some of the hints that they have. I mean, we talked about it in the book of Samuel. The prophet Samuel clearly is a ghost and comes back to visit King Saul. So they definitely believed in a spiritual world. They believed in some existence after death. 100% they did. The issue is it's not discussed. So the actual texts about what that world is like, they're not there. So that doesn't mean it's not, as I said, we have every reason to believe that they believed that there was a life to come in the time of Abraham, in the time of King David, that they believed in the world to come. It's just not in the Bible.
Personal thing as well, so to not give.
I like it. Yeah, Sheila, I like it. I like the fact that there's not a doctrine about what heaven looks like. I like that there's not Jewish pictures of heaven, because it is a personal belief, and it's something that, if there was, yeah, we'd have people arguing over it and who gets in and what we've yeah, and people actively trying to get there, right? Because if there was no reason for us to be here, which we talked about, because you weren't at this class, Sheila, but we actually have a great text we read about, that this world is the entryway, is the anteroom to the world to come. But yeah, if there's no purpose for this room, for this world, then you got people who will strap bombs to their bodies and say, I want to get to the next world. And we don't do that. So the fact that we're not promising people 70 virgins is a little bit of a thing that helps us stay valuing life.
7.
So I said 70.
Oh,
It's not 17. That's a downgrade. No, 7. 7 for 7 virgins. No one's going to strap a bomb to themselves, Joanne. Come on. No, no, but in all seriousness, I mean, it does keep us focused on this world, which is a good thing. There's got to be a reason for this world, I think, right? So
Hey,
here's,
Rabbi,
yes.
if a rabbi, who provided the previous text? Where did that, if rabbis didn't, if they're not being quoted, who is the author of all
Yeah,
this?
there was, we don't know, but an unspecified rabbi taught that.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it was written in the rabbinic period.
Got it.
We don't know who. Almost every text we're going to read from now on, and the ones we read with the numbers, they just don't have they don't have attribution. I mean, it's frustrating, but I mean, at the end of the day, we don't even know if that person wrote that or whether they quoted somebody who came before. But anyways, the point is we don't know. But these are all sayings that are at least 2,000 years old, or at least, no, on the outside, 1,800 years old. And they've been part of our text for a long time. But yeah, we oftentimes don't know who the last half of this, we don't necessarily know who said it. But this one we do. So this one is Yehuda ben Tema, who said, be strong. And by the way, the fact that his name is Tema is interesting because he has a very Jewish name. The most Jewish name is Yehuda, right? Judah, Yehuda. But his father's name was Tema, which is a Aramaic name, which is the basis for the name Thomas. So that's interesting. So it shows you that sometimes people had a father who had a Greek name. We mentioned that before, or a Aramaic name, and then they had a Hebrew name. Interesting. So we have people who name their kids more Jewish than they were named themselves, right? All right. So this is what he said. Be strong as a leopard and swift as an eagle and fleet as a gazelle and brave as a lion, right? Those are the oftentimes listed as four things. To do the will of your father who is in heaven. Oh my gosh. Avinu, or in this case, Avicha b'Shabashamayim. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Sounds a lot like that, right? Where do you think they got it from? The Lord's Prayer came out of this type of language, rabbinic language. You're just telling somebody that the Lord's Prayer is actually very similar to the Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish or the Kaddish, right? Hallowed be God's name. Very similar language. I mean, acknowledged by Christians as a borrow. But anyways, to do the will of your Father who is in heaven. He used to say, the arrogant is headed for Gehinnom, and the blushing for the Garden of Eden. May it be the will, O Lord, our God, that your city be rebuilt speedily in our days, and set our portion in the studying of your Torah. This is kind of ends with a blessing, right? Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu. Right? That's a common phrase for blessings during the rabbinic period. Not the Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, but Yehi ratzon milfanecha. May it be your will, God, right? And you should rebuild your city, right? Which of course is Jerusalem. Rebuild your city and give us a place, give us a portion in your Torah. So both Israel being rebuilt and the Torah. So that tells you that the Jewish people have been praying for the rebuilding of Jerusalem since it was destroyed. This wasn't something that we came up with a couple hundred years ago. This is something that we've obviously been saying for a long time. Bim he ra v'yamenu. May it be rebuilt speedily in our days. That's what we say. We've been saying it for a long time, and it actually finally started happening during our days, speedily in our days. So when we look at those things, we're compared our intensity and our desires should be like animals. The best qualities of these animals. So you can see the namer, which is the leopard, definitely some kind of jaguar or leopard, which we have in the Bible, as opposed to, again, the Ari, the lion, that we also have a lot in the Bible. The namer we don't have as much, but it's like a tiger or a leopard. It's another kind of feline, great cat, but it's not in the lion family, okay? We have lots of different lions in the lion family. And then the fast ones, right, are the eagle and the gazelle. So one bird, the nesher, and the tzvi, which is the deer. Those are the fast animals, the quick animals. So kal and rots are both used as words for being quick. So we should be like those things to do the will of God, to do the will of God. So again, it's a phrase that we have more in the rabbinic literature. You don't really have it in the Torah itself, this concept of God our Father that's in heaven. That's the Avicha Shabashamayim, up in the sky, in the heavens. Our Father in heaven. It's weird to hear because we think about it so much as the Lord's Prayer. We think about it from a Christian standpoint. And of course, Mormons use it all the time, Heavenly Father. But it really comes from the rabbinic literature, and it's the first times we see it is in the rabbinic literature. So here, the arrogant are going to hell, and the opposite of the arrogant are the people who blush, which in Hebrew is the boshet, the people who get embarrassed easily. Boshet panim, people who get red-faced and who get embarrassed. They're going to heaven. That's nice, right? The blushing, the people who blush, they are embarrassed and they're going to heaven. Gan Eden. So that's, again, Gehinnom on one side and Gan Eden on the other. So you definitely don't want to be Ozpanim, which is arrogant. It's like a strong face. And Bushat Panim, which is blushing face. So in Hebrew, it's even more poetic in a way, because the word panim is used, punim is used in both. Az panim versus Bushat Panim. So as strong as you're supposed to be, it's not strong of face, it's strong of desire to do God's will. So that is a nice phrase. It's again calling it into mind the animals that are inspirations for us. But it also is got a little lesson here too, which is about not being arrogant. And then of course finishes with a blessing. So it's an interesting text, if you will, because it gives us this great saying of his, which is actually a couple of ideas, right? And then he has a long saying that he used to say. And this is one we looked at very quickly before. And I told you a couple of weeks ago that we'd get to this today. Or I didn't tell you get to it today, but I said we'd get to it. But this is the one that talks about our different ages, our different stages of life, if you will. Well, let's take a look at it again. For those who remember it, let's take a look. He used to say, at 5 years of age, the study of Scripture. At 10, the study of Mishnah. At 13, subject to the commandments. At 15, the study of Talmud. At 18, the bridal canopy. At 20, for pursuit of a livelihood. At 30, the peak of strength. At 40, wisdom. At 50, able to give counsel. At 60, old age. At 70, fullness of years. At 80, the age of strength. At 90, a bent body. At 100, as good as dead and completely gone from the world. So now these are really good until you get into 90, which I'm sorry, Joyce, is definitely not applicable to you. And
Thank
everybody
you.
always reads these and goes, I don't know about that. But what's really nice about this, I think, on the good side, is that at 70 and 80, you're not going downhill.
Right.
At 70, you have a fullness of years. And at 80, you get a gvura, you get a strength. There's a strength that you have at 80. So that's a really good thing. And you can see it in quotes because strength, what are they talking about? But they really are saying that at 80, there's a strength that comes to you when you're 80. And again, even at 70, the translation of it is as seva, which is fullness. This is considered, again, as we've talked about before, in the book of Psalms, it says at 70, what is a man's years? It's 70. Why? Because 70 was considered to be like, if you reach 70, you reach the fullness of years. That's why.
Which one includes
2,000 years
wisdom?
ago.
That's what I thought. But some people live very long lives.
Yes. And even back then they did. But 70 years was considered a fullness of life. Now, that's why we have a tradition, as some of you know, that at 83, you can have a second bar mitzvah.
Ah,
You didn't know that? Yeah. Because you got 70 years, and then when you get another 13, you can have. And now some people have a third bar mitzvah, the second bonus bar mitzvah. They don't have to wait another 7 years. They wait another 13 years, so they have one at 96. But I remember that Kirk Douglas did his bar mitzvah, second bar mitzvah at 83, and he read Torah and he did a full thing at 83. My dad was there, and he said it was amazing. The guy got up and read Torah, and he was there for 10, he was around for 10 more years.
This is what we're expecting for Joyce.
That's what we're expecting for Joyce,
Yeah.
to do another bat mitzvah. Well, there you go, Joyce. Joanne says she wants to hear you. She wants to hear you do your second bat mitzvah. But I think, Joyce, you didn't get to have a bat mitzvah at 13, did you?
no, I did not.
So it'd really be her first.
So that's
But
okay.
that's okay. Well, anyways, you
Well,
can't volunteer.
I went.
Joanne, you
I
can't
didn't
volunteer
go to
somebody
Hebrew-
else.
Rabbi, I
What?
didn't go to Hebrew school. I went to Sunday school and graduated in the 12th grade. And I don't know what they called that then at Sharazenic.
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing. Whatever it was, Joyce, it definitely prepared you for a life of good teaching and good lessons in our tradition.
And a
Good
life
health.
of joy.
Yeah, and you had some great experiences in your Jewish community.
Yes,
Which was at the time one of the great Jewish communities in America in Detroit.
at one
Joyce
time.
was at Shari Tzedek,
Mhm.
and she was conservative. Yes,
Yeah,
and again, the synagogues in Detroit were major synagogues for the country. Not that they're not now, but they were
and
really
beautiful at that
really
time
major
too.
synagogues. So I wish I could have seen them in their fullness of their strength.
Oh, boy.
But no, I've never been to Detroit. My wife has been there. I've never been there.
But that was Art Deco. I mean, that was.
I know, I love it. Listen, there was a synagogue, there's still the synagogue Tiferet Israel in Cleveland that is built in a similar Art Deco style. I love that style. First of all, I love that style. But I wish, again, I would have been able to see some of this. And to some extent, Wilshire Boulevard is built with some of that style too, the Art Deco style here. But yeah.
I
Anyways,
wish you
well,
had known Rabbi Adler.
yeah, Morris
You-
Adler was one of the great rabbis of the
You would have
last generation.
really enjoyed being with him.
Yeah. What a story. What an amazing man, and a
Yes.
tragic story though.
True.
Right?
Yes.
Tragic story. Tell people what happened, Joyce.
Well, he was counseling a young man, and the young man, I believe, became psychotic and went into the synagogue and shot him in the synagogue to death. He killed him.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there that day. I lived right next door to the synagogue, but I wasn't there that day.
So what does that tell us, by the way? Tells us that,
You need to carry a gun.
well, no, stop it, John. It tells us you should carry a gun. It tells us that things happened before too. It
Yes,
didn't just start.
right.
Didn't just come out of nowhere.
That there are disturbed and mentally
Yeah.
ill people who do bad things.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, but he's remembered for lots of teaching and a lot of prayers and things that he contributed to American Jewish community, even to this day. But
Yeah.
when we think about these stages of life, look, the most amazing thing is that when this was written 2,000 years ago, and for the last several thousand years, we don't know how long this had already been going on for to this time. Let's just start at the beginning. The fact that 5 years old people were studying Torah, that's unheard of, because we were the only people that were teaching people
Right.
how to read. And in Hebrew, it's literally la mikra, how to read. The Koreh is also the Bible, and it's actually the origin of the word Quran, which means to read as well. But in Hebrew, we say the mikra is the reading, and we translate that usually as scripture, as a literal reading. But again, from 5 years old, the kids were reading Torah. That's what time they started reading Torah. And I want to tell you, within the Orthodox world today, this is also the guidance. This is guidance for people, folks, to this
Yes, it
day.
is.
Understand it. This is guidance for people who live in today's world, walking the streets, our neighbors, our friends. Some of them follow this very strictly. So 5 years old, you start reading the Torah. When you're at 10, that's when you can start reading the Mishnah. That's when they prepare the kids for studying Mishnah. I will tell you that today in the Orthodox world, they start learning the Mishnah even younger than 10, but kind of the guidance was you start off with the Torah, and then you move when the children are ready, you can move into the Mishnah, into the rabbinic commentary. Now this, folks, is the very first time that we ever have any idea or any indication in the rabbinic period, this time, when we get this, at 13, ben shalosh esrei la mitzvot, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. This is the first time during this period where we start to see this. It's not in the
Wow.
Torah. It's not in the Bible that at 13 they're subject to the commandments, but here it does. Here it flat out says. Doesn't say what the ritual is, doesn't say what they do, but it does say that this is what's done. They are responsible for the mitzvot. We do know, by the way, from contemporary sources, including Christian scripture, that around this time is when, very famously, when we look at, I always like to show this too, that according to, I'll show you the actual text. So, because we have, like I said, the Christian scripture says, Christian Bible says that during this time, Jesus actually read, at that time, up and had his bar mitzvah. What's interesting about it in Christian Bible is that we don't really have anything other than this description of his childhood. So in all fairness, I do want to say we don't know a lot about it, about his childhood, because it says that he was born in a manger. There was no guest room available for him. That's the part that you know. And then on the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise the child, he was named Jesus. So it says that Jesus was circumcised, even in the book of Luke, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The name the angel had given him before he was conceived. And then the next thing we see, we don't know anything about him. 8, when it came time for the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took him to present him to the Lord. That's his Pinion Haben, right? This is the Pinion Haben. So that's at 30 days. So we talked about that. And then it says, in this verse, right here, it says, when the parents brought their son in the child Jesus for them, where the custom of the Lord required, Simon took him to the arms. I'm going to just get to, here it is right here. This is what we know about him. This is literally from his birth all the way to this moment. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. They thought he was with them, and they come back, and he was teaching them. And he said to his parents, "Didn't you know that I was in my Father's house?" And that was it. That's all they know about him. It's all the Christian Bible knows about him. So it says that he started teaching when he was 12. Not quite 13. Maybe they wanted to make a point that he was an advanced student. I don't know. He skipped a grade, but it also is possible that Luke just didn't know exactly that it was 13. But around that time was when people have to start taking on the commandments. Look, we don't know exactly why it's 13. We, in our society, call someone who's 13 a teenager. Up until that time, they're not a teenager. In Judaism, we understood that 13 was when people start to be responsible for taking the commandments on themselves, that their parents at that point no longer are responsible for what they're doing when it comes to commandments. It's not like they can do anything they want, but it means that they actually have to start being counted as a minyan. In a minyan, they can start reading from the Torah, they can start fasting on the holidays. Whatever the mitzvahs are that they're supposed to be doing, at that point, they're supposed to be doing them. They're not supposed to be learning them anymore, they're supposed to be doing them. And again, to some extent, they're reaching a level of maturity, which again, they're not done learning, because at 15, they're still studying, now they're studying the Talmud, which, by the way, tells us that whenever this was written after the Mishnah and the Talmud were finished, which means this is a pretty late text, because the Talmud wasn't finished until around 500. Now, it could be that it's not the finished Talmud yet. It's the commentary of the Mishnah that was being edited and being coalesced at that time, but they were already calling it the Talmud. They were already differentiating a Mishnah and a Talmud. So again, Mishnah was finished around 200. This is somewhere post 200, from 200 to maybe 400 or 500. That's when this was written. So it tells us that, again, 1800 years ago, this is where we saw the life cycle, if you will. At 18, the bridal canopy, which means that people were not supposed to be married before they were 18. Were they married before they were 18? Yes.
Yeah.
Were they supposed to be? Probably not, or at least not encouraged. Some people would say they can be married in the sense that they were promised or betrothed, but to actually go to the chuppah, which is what the word is, chuppah, the marriage canopy, they couldn't actually go to the marriage canopy until they were 18, which is the time where they were actually going to start living together, where again, they're living together as husband and wife. So the chuppah isn't then. Were they allowed to be betrothed? Yes. Did people get betrothed before that 18? 100%. But generally speaking, they don't get married before 18, and that exists to this day. In the Orthodox world, though, once you're 18, you're now fair game, so to speak. You're now on the market, which a lot of people would say is not a great thing. On the other hand, our counter argument being, but we're going to not have children born out of wedlock, and we're going to have people be in a relationship when they start having sex.
That's one way of it.
Do you like it? Not saying that you need to like it, understand it and understand the logic behind it. That's the logic behind it. Are we the only people that do that? No. We're a fraction of our people are still doing this, but they are guided by these types by what we read in the Talmud, by reading these texts, which tell people guidelines for how they're supposed to live. So 18.
My father would like me to wait till I was 40. That's so serious.
How old were you when you got married?
19.
Yeah. How old was your mom, Sheila?
When she got married, 18.
Yeah. My mom was 19.
I was 30.
Joyce, how old were you when you got married? First time? The first marriage. How old were you? Joyce?
Oh, I was 19 when I got married.
Yeah.
There you go. It was a thing.
It was a thing because
It was,
didn't matter whether you were Orthodox or not
No.
at 19 or 18 or 19. My mom was at college. She wasn't
Yeah.
like not at college, but she still got married. So the point was, it's not like college stopped people from getting married at 19 in our tradition. So we had a point in time, let's say from the 40s, 30s or 40s to the let's say 70s or 80s, where 70s probably, where people probably early 70s, mid 70s, early somewhere in that 10-year time period where people were still getting married at 18 to 19
Yes.
and they were going to college. So it wasn't like it was one or the other. We had, what do you want to call it? A 30-year period, a generation or two into two generations where people had both. Could it be done? Yes.
younger, not 19 necessarily, but in your early 20s. As a woman, it's good to raise a family young and not be 30s or 40s.
Not be in your 50s with teenagers.
True. How about teenagers? Would have thought my ex-husband, he had twins at 58.
So there is obviously some wisdom to this. I don't know that we're ever in the non-Orthodox world going back to 18-year-old bridal canopies, but again, part of it was to create families and to understand that marriage is primarily for the continuation and the strengthening of the family unit. Look, I mean, people get married for a variety of reasons today. We had a pretty simple reason to get married, which was to have a family, to create to perpetuate and to continue the community. I mean, today we would go like, well, do you love the person you marry, right? You know, the famous "Do you love me" from Tevye, right?
Right.
But that's a modern question, right? That was not the question that people asked. So it was not for that reason. It was not for the fact that somebody had found they had not found their beshert, as we say today. We hoped that the person would be there b'shert, by the way. That's not a new idea. That goes back, hundreds of years, was the idea that there was somebody out there that was going to complete you or give you that missing piece, or would be the balance for you. That was the hope. I mean, it's in the Bible that Adam and Eve, that Eve was the other side of Adam. But regardless, that's not why people got married, for the love that they had for the person when they got married. I hoped eventually that you loved them. So that's 18. And that is, like I said, still done by some of us. At 20, the pursuit of livelihood, which meant that the guy got married before he necessarily had a career. He might have been training for a career. He might have been working in a career, but the pursuit of livelihood would be there. These were for rabbis, by the way, too. This isn't just for like the general public. This is for the rabbis themselves. It wasn't like, well, tell other people to do this. It meant that the rabbis themselves also had to have a livelihood. They had to have some type of way of making money. In the Hebrew, it's lirdof, to pursue something, but it is pursuit, and that's why in the brackets they have the word livelihood, but it's the pursuit of not pursuit of happiness, by the way, the pursuit of what you're going to do with your life, right? So at 20, which is roughly, by the way, roughly, not exactly, roughly the time that people finish college. Roughly, sometimes we hope they finish in their early 20s. But that is kind of where we said, go off and do something. Start chasing your dreams. Chasing your dreams when it comes to work, right? Not just any kind of thing, but a livelihood. So 30 is your peak of strength. And the Hebrew word just is koach, it's strength. At 30, you have strength. I don't know. I'm still young enough to remember that I had a lot more energy at 30. I will say, I do know that if that wasn't the peak of my strength, that was pretty close to the peak of my strength. But I think, yeah, I'm sorry, Jesse, you're looking at this right now and going, oh no. But yes, you're very close to the peak of your strength. Well, I guess it's a good thing. And it's not like you go downhill, because at 40, you have wisdom, and that is the word bina, which is also, I would also translate as discernment, but it's not necessarily knowledge, and it's not necessarily wisdom, actually. It's discernment. It's knowing what's right and what's wrong. And that's what the word bina is usually translated as opposed to intelligence or knowledge, which is da'at, and chokhmah, which is wisdom. Bina is I would call it the emotional, the EQ, the ability to know what to do in the right situation. I agree that it usually is not until about 40 that people have that.
I think it's more.
Perhaps, but maybe when you're in your 40s is when you start getting it. I'm hoping that by 40 you have a little bit better discernment, but that's the way I translated it. I wouldn't even translate it as wisdom. That's why I think wisdom is jumping on it a little bit more. I'd actually translate the next one. Well, 50, when it says eitzah, that is the Hebrew word for counsel, when you can start giving counsel to people. I would say that that's fair too. That also kind of implies the ability to like give advice to other people. And I think that's fair. I think that you should definitely be waiting until your 40s or 50s before you start giving advice to people. I think it's tough. And I think it's stupid especially for, like when I was a younger rabbi, to give people advice, especially again, from a standpoint of something that I hadn't experienced or really couldn't even begin to experience. It would be difficult for me to say that I was qualified to dispense advice and was hesitant to give advice. I am even today, but there are things that I've learned from, and there's things that I've seen that I feel like, yeah, I've seen a lot of situations like this, and I give better advice today than I would have, and I really didn't, I was hesitant to give advice to people before this stage of my life. The 61, Ben Shishim, it says, when you get to your 60s, right? Zkena, which they translate as old age, that's a horrible translation because old age seems to imply you're old. And the word zaken does mean old. But in the Bible and in the texts throughout, a zaken is not an old person, it's an elder, but an elder from the standpoint of the people who actually led the people. So when the Bible, and I'm talking about the Torah, when the Torah talks about the zakenim, when Moses talks to the elders of Bnei Israel, he's talking to the people who were the leaders of the community. So the people at 60, if that's how old you had to be in the biblical period and into the rabbinic period, if you had to be 60 before you reached the time of an elder, that's not a bad idea. But
Right.
that's why to call them old age is it doesn't make any sense. It's actually the term of seniority. And when we talk about seniority, when we say that someone's a senior, that implies they're old, right? When we say that. But if we say someone has seniority, that implies
They're on
a certain
top.
amount of dignity, right? And it's the same word, right? The word senior is the same word. So I would say seniority is what 60 is. 60, you've reached the age of seniority, where you are looked at as a guide, as a leader because of your old age or because of your age. How old you are has now given you that. So it definitely implies that you have to have lived a certain period, but it is a completely different connotation than old age.
Right.
And that's why it's not a good translation. Clearly means the time of being an elder. At Shishim, you're an elder, which is kind of funny because, well, anyone who's seen the Book of Mormon knows that they're called elders, and they're called elders once they pass a certain level in the church, and those elders can be like 20 years old. So when you start calling somebody in their 20s an elder, look, they based it on our Bible, they based it on the elders of the Bible, but yeah, it's kind of ridiculous because in our tradition, you got to live a certain amount of time before you can be an elder. It doesn't say it in the Bible per se, but it does call out skena, and it does never, well, I should say never used in a negative connotation, but clearly when it's used most of the time, when they're calling out the skenim, almost always it's the leaders of the people. The zkenim, when they talk about the elders, they're never talking about it in a negative idea. When they say the word zaken, sometimes it means the person is old, but it doesn't mean that they're feeble. So zkena is definitely not a negative connotation, which makes sense when you get to the next one, which is 70 is a fullness of years, which definitely seems to indicate, look, I've reached a certain stage of my life where people will look at me and say, that person's lived a good life. Now, doesn't mean your life is over because we have other stuff coming after, right? But I will say that only recently would we say somebody who, well, if you die at 70 today, people say that's tragic because the person should have lived longer. You feel like 70, if you don't get past 70, because well, we know the average lifespan is later than 70, especially for certain demographics, it's beyond 70. Maybe not 80, but it's definitely beyond 70. Some countries, it's even beyond 80. But 70, we would consider there's a certain fullness of life at 70. Unfortunately, even again, when somebody dies at 70, we say that that's very sad, that they didn't get to enjoy much of their retirement or much of their later years, or whatever you want to call it, time that they should have been enjoying not working as much. But unfortunately, again, on the other hand, if you make it to 70 and you die, nobody goes, oh, it was a tragic end for that person. Well, maybe they do, but you're not going to get a lot of sympathy if you die when you're 70 and people go, I can't believe that person died so young. Look, you could be 70 and still have parents alive nowadays, but that's not my point. My point is that people aren't going to go, "Oh, I can't believe the person died in their 70s. It's sad. You say it's, but I don't even know if, like, I don't know what the cutoff is for tragic. I'm not really sure. I guess it's always tragic when somebody dies, and somebody dies not living their full life, or dies young, or of a disease or something that cut their lifespan down. But I don't know that you're going to get a lot of sympathy for people if you say, I'm mourning for somebody who is 70, in the same way that you would if somebody's older than that. But we still have that as kind of in our minds, that 70 is a fullness, a certain fullness of years at 70. Then again, it doesn't mean that it's over, because at 80, we have gvura, we have strength. Yeah, we get a second wind at 80, which is really cool. That
If it's true.
if it's true, I don't know.
Why does it say it in hypotheticals?
With quotations around it, because they are questioning it to some extent. Like, is that really true? Because there's no quote. We don't have quotes in Hebrew. Well, we do in modern Hebrew, because we took them, we adapted them. But yeah, in Hebrew, it just says, what do you get then? You get gvura, you get strength. So there isn't a, I guess, are they saying that it's ironic? Because it seems like, why are you going in a different direction? But it's what it says. It says gvura, which means strength. It's gvura is, gibor is a hero, is a strong person. Gvura is the concept of strength in Judaism. Heroism too, to some extent, as I said, greatness. But yeah, 80 is considered to be the time of strength for people. It's what it says. And something it can be said for people who have reached 80 and if they're living a healthy life, and if they've gotten past some of the, some of the challenges that they have in their earlier years, that there is a certain I don't know, there's a certain second wind. I don't know, Joyce, you're shot well past this decade. What do you think in your 80s?
What I think comes is from all the learning and confidence and successes, if you have had them, there is an inner strength of confidence in yourself, security in that you can handle whatever comes.
If you had, so taking this text out, and you've had that period of life, with great
Yes.
strength, and I've known you through that period of life. So what would you say your 80s, if you would put one word on your 80s, which is what they're doing one word, right? These are one word things. I mean, they don't translate as one word all the time, but trust me, in Hebrew, every one of these is one word. So it's meant to be a little clever, right? So the fact that it doesn't translate that well, when we talk about,
Well, at
even-
70, fullness of years, at 80, inner confidence.
okay. And you felt that you had a different level of confidence in your 80s as opposed to your 70s?
Yes, because things that I learned began coalescing together and connecting with one another and making more sense the more I used the tools that I had and that I have learned.
So you said, 80s is inner, you said confident? No,
Inner
strength,
confidence.
inner confidence. Okay. All right. Well, that's a pretty
And
good thing.
90, my God, I don't know about other people, but I have felt so powerful in the last few years in learning how to handle grief on my own and then being able to teach it. My group is fabulous, and I've started a new tradition in March of giving new tools and reporting on it in the next e-blast that goes out, what we learned in the previous session. And tools to handle mourning it's a new concept. And I have been doing that since the beginning of March. So I'm getting more creative at 94 than I even was in my 80s. And my group is up.
I don't
to
know what else to say other than it's just amazing, Joyce. I mean, you are unbelievably amazing. So it is, yeah, I don't know. There's nothing to say. It's just amazing.
My group is up to 16, 18 people some
Yeah.
days.
So we would say at 90, amazing, at least when it comes to Joyce.
You can use that because that's what it
Amazing.
feels like inside.
Amazing. Well, all I know is that I traveled to Israel last year with Joyce and she got sick and she got sick and she got sick, but she went to Jordan. She went to Jordan sick. I mean,
I climbed
She-
on the truck.
she persevered and pushed through. Yeah, it's just amazing. So I will say, everybody who knows you knows that this is definitely not a bent body. This is a woman who has amazing, she has better posture than I do. And she sits and she's, you know, I always tell people, I'll go over to Joyce's house and she's sitting cross-legged in her chair. She's sitting, I don't even, can you say Indian style anymore? It's
I'm very
cross-legged, whatever.
flexible.
So I don't want to say anything politically incorrect right now, but she's sitting in a position that I can't get into right now. And it is, yeah, it's quite amazing. And obviously Lee had that too,
Yes.
into his 90s, which was pretty impressive. All the things that he was able to do, into his 90s. So yeah, in my experience, there are definitely examples of treading into these years, these later years, and however you want to say them, the last the last word is not the last word here because we don't know. And again, we see people who do amazing things into years that, again, maybe our ancestors couldn't have imagined, but this is pretty amazing. And it does inspire us, Joyce. It does inspire us that we don't know what we'll be blessed with, but we also have to take good care of ourselves too, which is something that Joyce has done. You know, she hasn't abused her body. It's not like she, never has a drink or never has anything that she enjoys, but she definitely lives with moderation and with a very good diet and taking care of herself. It's not like she's
I
out
am
there.
blessed. I am
Yeah.
blessed.
But you also are careful. You also
Yes,
know that if your body doesn't like something, you don't eat it. Even if
exactly.
you want to eat it, you don't, and you listen to your body, which is a really important thing to do. Because sometimes we override our bodies with our minds, and we try to make our bodies do things that they shouldn't do. And Joyce has definitely taught me that you got to listen to your body.
Right. And respect it and treat it with respect.
Yep.
Yes.
So these aren't just accidents. There's you got to have some obviously good genes, but you also have to work and you have to do your part. We'll do our part.
Hey, Rabbi, before you move forward,
Yes.
that last sentence,
Yes.
it doesn't say out of this world, right? Backtracking to discuss heaven and hell. It says completely out of the world.
Yeah.
I find that
The
I find that
olam. It does not say the olam haba, right? It does not say the world to come. It literally means this world. And it probably should have said out of the world, out of this world, but it doesn't say olam haba. When we don't have olam haba, we have to assume that it's this world, the world. Olam haba is like the next existence, the next universe, if you will.
Right.
Because if olam is the totality of what we experience, The olam haba is the totality of what we next experience. But whenever it says olam, it means this world. And again, not really this world, because it doesn't mean the planet. Olam does not mean planet. It has a connotation both of time and space, which to us would be what we use today as the word for universe. So I wouldn't translate olam ever as world, because world seems to imply the globe, the planet, Earth, whatever you want to call it. Olam is not that. It's universe or existence. This existence, by the way, let me rephrase that. This current existence that we have. So that's what olam really means. It does not mean the world, which we would understand to be the globe, or
Right.
it means the universe, really, because it's everything. It's the totality of everything, which is why when we say leolam vaed, the word olam there is not translated as world, right? But as forever.
Mhm.
So that's why it's time. It has both a connotation of time and space. World being the space, obviously, and forever. And then if it's leolam vaed, it's forever and ever. So olam clearly means both time and space. All right. So the last two texts, which are the last parts of chapter 5, which we're going to read today, is this one, well, these two, because the names are very strange here. Ben Bogbog and Ben Hehe. Because are these really names?
I don't know.
We don't know. And maybe he had this name, Yochanan, because Ben Bogbog means just the son of Bogbog. And Ben Hehe would be the son of Ben Hehe, which we know that there's a person named that who lived during the time of Hillel. So these guys would seem to have been from a long time ago. There is a tradition that we don't really know their names, that Hehe and Bogbog are actually nicknames, so to speak, that were given to people who actually were not born in Jewish tradition. They were converts. They were people who came from outside of the community and were Jews who, again, had chosen Judaism. But this phrase is a beautiful phrase. I actually have friends who turned this phrase into a song. Hafach ba v'hafach ba. Turn it over and turn it over. Keep turning it over. For all is inside of it. And look into it and become gray and old therein. And do not move away from it, for you have no better portion than it. So, this is a great image that when we turn over and look through and examine the Torah, when we surround ourselves in it, this is a great place to be, right? And when we put ourselves in that world, we're part of something bigger. We're part of a quest for knowledge, for understanding our world, our universe, ourselves, God, and we understand that being in that environment of study is where we're meant to be. Right? We're not supposed to try to get out of it. That's where we're trying to get into. We're trying to be in that. And so where are we going? We're going to want to be in that. We're going to be in that environment where we're turning it over and turning it over. So where does it end? People ask me, where does the Wednesday night class end? Where's the Tuesday morning class end? It never ends. Because that's where we're supposed to be. We turn this over and we're turning it over, and we turn the next book over. And when we finish it, we'll turn it over again, right? So we constantly are turning it over. And by turning it over, by the way, we're looking at all sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the rabbis really understood this to be not, well, in this, it seems like there's two sides to it, because it says hafach ba v'hafach ba, turn it over and then turn it over again. Now, again, that's partly because you can't just say it over and over again. But it's a beautiful idea because it's one where the rabbis actually said that there are 70 sides to the Torah, Shivat Panim LaTorah, which is that there's a lot of sides, there's a lot of facets. So it's like a 70-sided diamond where you can look at it from different sides and you see something new. You see something that you can't see unless you look on it from that side. And so what's interesting about it is that you are constantly looking at different sides of it, different facets of it, different faces of it. That's what Shivat Panim LaTorah means. It's 70 faces. Panim is faces. But if you think about it, that's again like what facets means when we say facets on a diamond. Is we look at those sides and we see, and of course 70 is a symbolic number for infinite. There's infinite different ways of looking at it. And so it's not just turning it over twice, it's looking at the different sides of it and seeing different things of it as we're looking at different ways, looking at it from a mystical side, looking at it from a practical side, looking at it from a midrashic side, looking at it from, archaeological side, looking at it from all these different ways of seeing ourselves and seeing where we are. And again, 70 would give us a different way of looking at it, and obviously beyond however many years we have on this planet. So we're constantly looking at it and turning it over again. And we just, and that phrase, dekula ba, that everything is in it, means that like the things that are in it are infinite, right? There's not an end to the things that are in it. And that, again, this is our portion. This is our chelek. This is where, we, when we have it. And then there's nothing better than that. And the last line is he says, according to the labor is the reward, which is an interesting idea. And again, in the Aramaic, this idea, the tzara is the agara, like you put in the effort and you're going to get something back out of it. Now, again, most people think that these two texts are connected to each other, that like you turn it over and you're studying the Torah, and then Ben Hehe adds to it. And again, some people say he's the same guy. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but the nicknames, that, yeah, when you turn it over and you're looking at it, you got to put work into it too. Turning it over, by the way, implies that you have to do something with it. It's not just going to sit there and give you the answers. You actually have to turn it over and look for it. It's going to be on that side too, but you have to turn it over. You have to flip it over. You have to turn it over. You have to look at it from the other angle. And when you do that and you actually put your effort into it, you're going to get something out of it. You're going to actually get a reward based on how much work you put into it. If you put your time and effort into it, there will be a reward for it. And in my experience, that's definitely the case. I can only tell you that in my experience, that's who, when it comes to almost anything, right? That's where you're gonna see, you're gonna see your effort pay off, right? You have to put in the work. So, yeah, let me just see if I have my friend's song somewhere, but I can play it as we go out today. I'm not sure if I have it, because their song was not very well known, but it was a good song on this text. I don't see it. Hold it a second. Nope. Let me just see if I can find it. But yeah, they wrote a song called Hafach Ba, which means turn it over. Turn it over. No, I don't see it. But yeah, it's a great phrase to live by, and it's one that I think of a lot, which is, am I looking at it? Am I looking at it from every angle? And it's an interesting thing that the rabbis were taught to do that. Don't assume that the way you're looking at it is the only way to look at it. There might be another side to this that you're not considering. So I like the fact that we were kind of encouraged to, you know, to take different sides and to look at what, you know, could be different ways of looking at a text and understanding that there are different ways to look at it. Let me just see if I can find it. If I'm looking at one other thing, no, can't find it, unfortunately. If I find it, I will share it next week. So, yeah, that's the end of chapter 5. And as we go into chapter 6, next week, you'll see this kind of continues some of the ideas that we've read about studying and about, you know, our time here in this world, being dedicated to learning and to growing and to having the text help us in our traditions. Again, having sometimes we know who says this stuff and sometimes we don't, which, by the way, like sometimes the best sayings or the things that stick with us, we can't remember who said them, and that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it's important to know who said them, by the way, that's something we're gonna read actually next week, which is one who learns from his fellow one chapter, one verse, even one letter is obligated to treat them with honor. So if you know who told you this very thing that you learned, you're supposed to give them credit. But
Well, I need to give you credit, Rabbi, because no, seriously, a couple of weeks ago, you commented during our group how important it was to study Torah and that we do study it formally at least twice a week. And this is the only synagogue, temple, whatever in our Santa Clarita Valley that studies Torah on a regular basis. And you touched me so deeply, and this class gained in importance to me when you explained it, and I honor you and I thank you because it has lived in my heart, and it has been very important to me, what you described and what I learned that night. Thank you.
no, I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody here because again, I can't study Torah I mean, I can study it by myself, but I never learn as much and I never learn, again, I don't learn in the same way as being able to talk with people and to be able to hear your thoughts and your feelings on this because like Sheila here today, Sheila's not here all the time. I'm not embarrassing her, but she's not here all the time. But again, you know, the questions that she had and the comments she made about, you know, life after death, it's really important. It's really important to remember that, to hear that, to articulate again, this idea that a lot of these ideas, especially when it comes to that are personal, you know, our personal beliefs, and that Judaism, by not having a dogma on life after death, actually allows us to have a lot more freedom and a lot more, hopefully, comfort in that, because I'm not going to tell you what the world to come is about, and it doesn't really matter what I believe. And I don't tell somebody, well, you have to believe this because the Torah says that this is what it is, or you have to come to some conclusion you feel uncomfortable with. So thanks for articulating that, Sheila. And again, that's why you have to come all the time, Sheila, because you might give us a nugget like that makes us remember that you know, that's what we got to do. And again, as we say, as Ben Bogbog told us, you have no better portion than it is. Nothing better than, there's nothing nicer and tova than being in this. So yeah, that's what we're searching for, is to just find good places to be and good things to do. So thank you all for doing that. It's much better than binge watching something on Netflix. At least for me. I don't want
And for me.
okay, I don't want to come across as an arrogant person in that sense, but yes, there's
We
so
don't
much.
have Netflix.
Thank you, everybody. And we will hopefully again keep everybody in good health. And let's pray for our people coming home soon. I just can't, I can't believe I'm still wearing this 173 days. And these people have to come home. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Oh, here,
Bye,
come here.
guys. See you next
They can't hear
week.
you. You got to sit here. Well, they can't see you. Sit there. Joanna's now taking over.
I'm taking over now. Mary,
Hi.
Miriam, can you see me?
Yeah, turn around, look at the camera.
Okay.
It's straight
Have a
ahead.
mic.
It seems weird. You want to look at the people.
I have to look at the people?
Yeah, look at the camera, look at that.
Okay, there's the camera. All right, goodbye.
Bye, Joanne.
Bye.
See you next
Bye,
week.
everybody. Take care. Good to see you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Joan.
Bye, thank you.